Hello everybody and welcome to your Premier Injuries Deadline live stream. Now obviously just to remind everybody that it is an early deadline this game week, so remember to get your teams locked in. That's why we're going live, just to make sure you've got the most up-to-date injury news. And just before we start as well, remember to head over to the to the Premier Injuries website if you've got any worries about people in the Premier League. We've got all the teams alphabeticalised so that you can go through, you can look at who's injured, and if we haven't answered your question, then don't worry. Normally it's answered on there, but you can also tweet us, message us, and we will do our best. But we're pushed for time today. We've only got about half an hour. Jandre Bottas has so many questions. We're going to try and go through them all. But let's head straight into it, Ben, because we don't want to dilly-dally today. We don't want to preamble too much. Bournemouth, what is the latest news there?
Yeah, no time for messing the day. We heard from Gary O'Neill around 1 o'clock. He said that he was going to make late calls on one or two players. What we do know, Jefferson Lerma missed out in the FA Cup. That's managing an ongoing knee problem, so hopefully he should be fine. The right back, Adam Smith, he collected his fifth caution of the campaign in game week 19, so that rules him out of this one. That could open the door for potentially Jack Stacey. Don't think there's a lot of interest from the FPL community, with all due respect to those cherry players. So, like I say, do we move on? Taverna's the only other player that was maybe garnering any kind of chatter on my timeline. Unfortunately, that hamstring injury will keep him out of this game week.
And yes, so let's move it on to Arsenal. A lot of people are interested in them, especially Saka, because he came off midweek. He was substituted in the cup game, and so people were a little bit worried with that Oxford United, I think that is, game. But yes, with the Saka situation, is it all clear?
I wouldn't say 100% no. I mean, initially those concerns were played down by Mikel Arteta, dealt with those with a fairly straight back, just said he's fine. Of course, we always know that injuries can evolve over the following 24 to 48 hours, and that may be the case with Saka here. Now, I do expect him to be past fit, and indeed, I have him in my start 11. But when asked today ahead of the North London derby, Mikel Arteta said he's fine. I think he should be okay. So not 100%. There is just that shred of doubt there. But like I say, I don't think he won't be missing this North London derby, particularly given, how well Arsenal are going in the league.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, I'm just chatting to people in the chat as well. Just to remind people, we are going through alphabetically. So we do have a question on Darwin and Ivan Toney, but they will be answered very soon. But this is a big game for Arsenal, and we will get to the Spurs team lineup as well to see if there's any kind of news on that. But Aston Villa, just before we get on to the injury news, this is a team that I'm really excited to see over the coming weeks. They've got a nice run of fixtures. Unai Emery has had a tough run of fixtures since he started there, and he's already proven himself quite a bit. I think they're going to be ones to watch. They could have some good potential assets. The question for me, Ben, is why is Bailey starting each game week? We saw last game week, he just can't, hit the target at all. Why isn't it Ings and Watkins? If they're looking for a bit of pace for the striker, it should be Ings up there because he showed his class when he was on.
Good question, Jason, and I actually have no idea. I think I expressed, certainly my thoughts, maybe a podcast a couple of weeks back. I'm just not a fan. I don't see what he brings. He lacks quality. Look, he flatters to deceive. And I'm going all the way back to that game against Southampton last season when he was absolutely atrocious. So, I'm not a big fan. I don't understand it. But Unai Emery must see something on the training pitches that, he believes that he deserves a place in that team. For me, it would be Danny Ings. There is possibilities that he could change this setup, this formation, and maybe look to bring Philip Coutinho in. But again, he hasn't been pulling up any trees either. So, it's a strange one. Villa are affected by injuries heading into this game week. There are a few question marks, and that may sort of mean that we are limited in terms of the options available. Namely, I'm looking on that right-hand side. We know John McGinn's out with a hamstring problem. Matty Cash, he has come in and deputised just ahead of Ashley Young, but a groin problem threatens to rule him out. That's why we have Jacob Ramsey out there on the right-hand side. He himself has only just returned from a muscular problem. So that is a little bit of a gamble with regards to that. Like I say, if Unai Emery did want to change things up slightly, he could maybe go with a 4-3-3 or even a 4-2-3-1, and that maybe would open the door for maybe Watkins and Bailey to sit in behind Danny Ings potentially. But like I say, for the moment, Leon Bailey looks locked in, and yeah, I'm lost for words on that one.
Yeah, honestly, I don't understand it. You know, the double pivot of Louise and Kamara has really kind of pushed the team on to another level in the midfield. It's just the finishing now that's letting them down. And Bailey, he seems a good dribbler, but apart from that, he can't pass, he can't shoot, he can't cross. I'm not sure why he's in the team. But let's have a look at Brentford because, like I said, people, we're going through alphabetically. Ivan Toney is one of the most, asked about players this game week, Ben. We've got LK Think. He says news on Ivan Toney. We've got a question. Do you think Darwin to Toney, or should we be worried about the yellow card? But there's also, the obvious elephant in the room. There's also a potential ban, seeing the outcome of the FA's investigations. We don't like to speculate on that. But yeah, what is the latest on Toney? Because is he injured?
Well, he has been injured, and we've seen him stretchered off back in game week 18. I think it was, if I recall correctly. Initial prognosis was that it looked to be a knee problem, although there wasn't an obvious mechanism around that, around the striker being stretchered off. Thomas Frank later revealed, about 72 hours later, that it was a muscular problem, and actually that he had an outside chance to face Liverpool. It transpired that he didn't, and he wasn't risked in the FA Cup. But he's very close now in terms of being fully fit. I suppose the big question, and I do have Ivan Toney starting here, but that's by no means locked in, because if you think back to prior to that, before that FA Cup defeat to West Ham, they beat Liverpool 3-1 and dominated that game. And one of the standout players of that match was that Ewan Wissa. So, he would be fairly aggrieved and feel a little bit, hard done by if he's dropped out of that start 11, particularly if Ivan Toney hasn't been training fully over that period. So there's certainly a slight issue with regards to maybe a lack of sharpness. And yeah, look, that's one that I could look to change. We're waiting to hear from Thomas Frank. So if you do see me glancing over my shoulder, that's because we've had 9 press conferences all shoehorned in the last 60 minutes. And I'm waiting on 2, one being Antonio Conte from Tottenham and also from Thomas Frank at Brentford.
Yeah, no, I'm just keeping an eye on everybody's chat as well. So let's move our attention from Brentford to Brighton. And just looking at the form of Chelsea, probably Graham Potter will be regretting moving from Brighton, because they're playing from strength to strength, and I think Ferguson has been a revelation. He looks so good. You got Mitoma in there. What is the injury situation though? Are the stars of the team going to be ready for this weekend?
It depends what you mean by stars, but certainly Leandro Trossard is not expected to be in the squad. There's a little bit of confusion with regards to his availability last weekend in the FA Cup. The Athletic released an article prior to that game saying that there had been a little bit of a falling out due to his attitude, both on and off the pitch. And there's a quote there from Deserba saying that if you're not prepared to give us 100%, then I'm not prepared to give you a chance. Post-match, the Brighton boss confirmed that it was indeed a calf injury that had kept him out of the squad, and we're a little bit up in the air as to what would happen. But we've just heard literally from him in the last 15 minutes to confirm that Trossard is out of the squad. We do know that he had been working away from the main group, but again, that could have been as part of an individualized training program due to that calf problem. But this one is more of an internal disciplinary issue regarding his attitude, whether he moves in January or whether the Seagulls manage, to keep a hold of him until the summer. But, I don't think he'll be spending too long down at the Amex now. I think he's on his way.
That's amazing. a right turnaround as well when you think of it. You know, one of the stars of the team. Let's turn our attention though to the next team and Chelsea. I mean, as I mentioned there, Graham Potter, everything's falling apart, and they've got another injury after the fixture. It's just going from bad to worse, really, for the Blues, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we have 11 players listed as potentially unavailable for this weekend's game. And of course, players will still be assessed after that defeat at Craven Cottage less than 24 hours ago. But quite rightly, you pointed out that Dennis Zakira picked up upper quad injury. So that's muscle problem. Unlikely to make Sunday's game, given the quick turnaround. And then we also seen the debutant game of two halves, really. João Felix sent off, dismissed around about that hour mark for that high challenge on Kenny Tete. That's going to keep him out of the next three. Of the remainder of those sidelined, there's nobody really close to a potential return. Raheem Sterling's targeting, I think it's Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League next month. Christian Pulisic he might be on the sidelines until March. So look, there's a lot of problems going on, and I understand that the club are looking at trying to identify the issues within the medical department as to why they're picking up so many problems.
And Jandre Bottas has asked Reece James, is he still on course for the beginning of February?
Yeah, I suppose that there's a question here to be asked on whether we're talking about a player who's going to be injury free or fully up to speed and ready to perform at pre-injury levels. Is he going to be available? Yes, that would be the assumption at this point in time. But we have to remember that Reece James has suffered a lot of setbacks and has been hampered fairly severely over the course of this season. So there are no guarantees with that. But all being well, yes, he should be targeting a return probably towards the end of this month.
And just on screen for people, that ruled out list is unbelievable, along with the banning of João Felix too. I mean, it's kind of everything that could go wrong is going wrong for Chelsea, whereas the favours of Crystal Palace are a little bit better. But is there any injury news to kind of upset the progress of Patrick Vieira's team?
Yeah, no fresh injury concerns. We've got two long-term absentees that you've probably forgot about, to be honest. And Nathan Ferguson, only 8 competitive minutes, I think it is, since he joined the club. And also James MacArthur, and that's an ongoing hip issue. So those two are out of contention. Tyreek Mitchell returns after a 3-match ban. I expect him to come back in on that left-hand side, and that really opens up the question on who plays at right back, whether it's Nathaniel Klein or Joel Ward.
Okay, so that is the Eagles covered, and the Toffees are up next. Again, another team that is kind of in free fall at the moment. Is there any injury boost, at least, to the team? But, is there anything that can be positive for the fans of Everton?
Yeah, one potential or two potential, it depends on how you want to look at it. First and foremost, Dominic Calvert-Lewin came through that 3-game week unscathed. Frank Lampard did say that the striker still needs to be managed, but the good news is no setbacks, come through that absolutely fine. So he is fit and available. Secondly, we saw Alex Iwobi taking off in the FA Cup 3rd round tie against Manchester United. What looked to be fairly serious ankle problem. Frank Lampard indeed, and the club released a statement. The expectation was that they thought he would be around about 3 weeks, or certainly, towards the back end of January. However, it's not as bad as initially anticipated, and he will have a late fitness test on Saturday morning to determine his availability.
Cedric has a interesting point that you actually discussed in your short that we put up a little bit early in the week. He said, I'd suggest that Chelsea's injury problems in part are down to the change in training sessions in mid-season. This is one of the things that you talked about. Just for people, do check it out. It's really interesting. You did some number crunching on what is a pretty bad injury crisis for Chelsea, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what we, in terms, we call it an injury burden, and we calculate the number of injuries that have occurred during 1,000 competitive minutes played. Now, typically over the last 6 Chelsea managers, going back all the way to Jose Mourinho. I think the average comes in at around about 5.71 injuries per 1,000 minutes played. Now, prior to last night's game, where obviously Chelsea picked up another injury, Graham Potter was working at around about 11.1 injuries per 1,000 minutes played. So, not far off double what the average has been over the last sort of, I think, going back to 2013. Now, again, to contextualise, we're talking about unprecedented season in terms of congestion, in terms of number of games due to that World Cup. Graham Potter wanting to implement his own philosophies, players adapting to those methodologies, and also there's been a change in recruitment and the types of players that they're bringing in, and a move away from those more steady, robust players who are fairly sort of bomb-proof in terms of their injury resilience to maybe those more explosive, quick, fast players who are more likely and more prone to pick up those soft tissue and muscular tears.
And this is all in your fabulous shorts video, so people can check it out. There's the data in there. You put a nice graph there together too. We've got some questions from on Patterson. So people are worried: is he fit? Is he in contention? And if he isn't, Coleman comes in, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just having a look. Yeah, that needs changed. That needs updated. Seamus Coleman is a player that we do expect to start on the right-hand side. Nathan Patterson's going to be sidelined for potentially up to 6 weeks with a medial collateral ligament injury there. So he is out of first-team contention. That'll be one that we've changed. We've just heard from Frank Lampard. And like I say, because of the time we go live, there are several teams where we do need to update when we've heard from managers within the last sort of 60 minutes.
Yeah, and this is why I say check out the Premier Injuries website, check out your Twitter, Ben, and you can also message us as well. Kingslayer has said, what about Ivan Toney? We've already covered Ivan Toney. We go through all the teams alphabetically, so just wind back the video to the Brentford bit. But we're on Fulham now, and what is the situation there? We will see Mitrovic return for this weekend, won't we?
You would think so. He's pivotal to that way that Fulham play, and he's a big part of Marco Silva's plans. So yeah, we expect him to return after that suspension, even though Vinicius did manage to get a goal, and he quite rightly earned the manager's praise. There's at least one enforced change in there, and that's at left back. That's because Anthony Robinson picked up his 5th caution of the campaign. And we've also seen previously, when those fixtures are coming thick and fast, that Toyson normally drops out and is rotated for Diop. So I have Diop here in place of Tosin.
So on to Leeds United. And again, that they're a team that have had mixed fortunes with injury news. Is there positive news coming from Leeds?
Not really. There's been a setback for Somerville. That's ankle related. Picked up that problem in the FA Cup against Cardiff City. Jess March, lambast almost the performance of the referee, said that his players aren't being protected. So that's going to keep him out for around about a month. Good news that Patrick Bamford is fully training. He will be included in the matchday squad. However, it's that thing around about that match fitness and sharpness following surgery on his groin. So that's why we have Rodrigo starting up top.
Yeah, and he was an early season differential Dinnery pick. But Leicester, we talked about Everton in kind of free fall. I often talk about Leicester in kind of similar terms, that they're just not doing the bit. But do they have any positive injury news, or is it a continuation of these worrying things? And I guess a lot of people will be thinking, is Maddison close, or is it still, as you've described for a long while, just day to day? There's no certainty.
Yeah, he's still working with the medical department, so he hasn't even rejoined the first team. And like I say, the longer this goes on, the longer it'll take him to get back up to speed. Let's not forget now, it's been over 2 months since his last competitive appearance, and that was a 20-plus minute run out against West Ham. So he's still got a little bit of work to do, although, he's progressing well. Sumari, he's going to be out another month or so, which means Mendy could come back into the team. The other question mark, other than is it going to be Daka, Kelechi, or Vardy up front, is on that right-hand side, because Perez picked up a knock in the Carabao Cup against his former employers Newcastle on Tuesday night. And obviously with Maddison out, that could maybe hand Albrighton a lifeline. Doesn't get many Premier League starts at the moment, so we do have him in at the moment because of those question marks over Perez.
We do bring it back for Marius to Dallas from Leeds. Any kind of updates there? Because that was a bit of a horror tackle that took him out last year. I guess the situation, as you described a little bit earlier with Reece James, he might be returning to fitness soon, but will he be match fit anytime soon?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because the road to full recovery from long-term injuries are rarely smooth and without their bumps in the road, and that's the case with Stuart. Dallas was progressing really well and was in and around that squad for training, but had another little surgery just to tidy things up, to clean things out. Didn't quite feel 100%, so that procedure happened just on the turn of the year. And again, he'll be managed, and we don't have any kind of definitive time frame on a potential return. But suffice to say, he is progressing well, and I've always maintained any appearance this season would be a big bonus for both him and Leeds.
Goodness me. So we do have a quick question because we're very limited for time. Ben Chilwell, any updates on him?
He's getting closer. He has been sort of training outside, taking parts in elements of training, but he's still not fully integrated with the first team. He's slightly behind Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who is working with the squad now following that calf problem. So I would suggest maybe another 7 to 10 days behind maybe Loftus-Cheek.
And we do have another Leicester injury question. Ricardo Pereira, is he close to any type of return?
Again, long-term injuries, always difficult to give any kind of definitive timeline. What I would say is his initial recovery had him, being in contention around about, early February, all being well. We would expect maybe some appearances in a bounce game, behind closed doors friendly, or even the 21s prior to his return to the first team.
Okay, so now the big other player that a lot of questions on, just to remind people, Tony. Okay, so people do want to know about Tony. Just one more time, Ben. Somebody has said you never mentioned if Frank declared him fit and in the team. So just bring it back to that, because still getting a few questions about that. And then we'll move on to Darwin Núñez and the rest of the Liverpool team. So yeah, what is the situation with Ivan Toney? Just one more time, Ben.
So Ivan Toney is fit. He is available. I've always maintained that the question marks will be with regards to the performance of Wissa in the victory over Liverpool. He may feel a little hard done by if he's dropping out that starting 11, but as you can see from the graphic, I do have Ivan Toney starting. He is the club's talismanic striker. He is fit, available, and like I say, it will come down to Thomas Frank and whether he starts or not.
There you go. So Liverpool is the next one, and like I said, the second most, or maybe the most asked about player for you, Ben, this week is Darwin Núñez. Jandre Bottas has said, please give me good news on him, but he's not in your starting 11. So what is the situation there?
Yeah, so it's a hamstring problem. First and foremost, he hasn't trained this week. And Jurgen Klopp, as with any player really, if a player doesn't train on the eve of a game, then they won't be in contention. Full stop. End of story. Of course, when we heard from Jurgen Klopp, there was still a session to go, and even if Núñez was to train today, then any decision with regards to his involvement wouldn't be made until Saturday. You want to make sure that there hasn't been any kind of reaction overnight. It's hamstring related, therefore we need to be very, very careful, and that's why I'm trying to play the percentages here, and that's why I've went with Gakpo up front with Oxlade-Chamberlain on the left-hand side.
Interesting. A lot of people are saying, would you do Darwin Núñez to Harry Kane as a transfer?
I've done Darwin Núñez to Harry
Oh,
Kane as a transfer for this game week.
geez. So there you go. Already differential Dinnery ahead of the game. Right. Manchester City. Now, they've really rolled us up over the last few weeks. Pep has taken his roulette wheel to another level. Was there any reason why Cancelo has been in and out of the team? Is it just purely Pep and his overthinking tactics? And I guess a question to you, Ben, is are you worried once again, or maybe more so than usual with this Man City 11? Because Pep said midweek that he's got a crazy idea that he's going to unleash to the world against Manchester United.
Yeah, he was just joking, which is, I think, it went as a follow-up response to that he said, says, it was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment. So I certainly don't expect anything too far out of the box this weekend in the Manchester derby. Initially, I didn't have João Cancelo in my starting 11. His form, post World Cup hasn't been great. We've had him as an unused substitute. He played 45 minutes, and he's played out of position. That hasn't been great, but the absence of John Stones means that I've had a little, slight rejig in that back four, and that's why I put Lewis in. And look, I know there's some of the players who are missing. Laporte's out, Walker's out. We know that Stones and Diaz are both injured. So, look, I've went for Cancelo in this instance, but of course, Laporte could slot in where Nathan Ake is, and Ake could go to left back. Elsewhere within the team, I think, Mahrez has to start. And so by starting Mahrez, yeah, and Bernardo didn't play midweek, so then does that mean Gundogan's out? Then I've got Foden ahead of Grealish. Look, they're all big, big calls given their squad. I just think, those players who came in to the squad in the Carabao Cup against Southampton didn't do themselves any favours. And I think, Pep will default back to some of those players who've been performing in recent times.
Yeah, I mean, we've got messages here. I hate Pep already. I'm going to sell Cancelo. I mean, if you in the ownership of Cancelo, would you get rid of him for maybe a cheaper asset, but who definitely starts each game week?
Yeah, I wouldn't own Cancelo. The only player that I'm happy to own in that Manchester City backline is Edison.
Yeah.
Because for me, he's the only player that is nailed for minutes. And if you're paying premium prices for, City defenders, you want a guaranteed minutes. I could maybe take a punt on Lewis, given his price point. Is he 3.9 or 4 million? If you're spending that kind of money, you're not bothered whether he starts or not. He's an enabler, and anything you get from that is a bonus. But for the rest, no, I would tend to spar wide.
Right, so let's continue. Somebody said in the comments, are you sure about Lewis? We're not sure about any of them. It's Pep Guardiola at the end of the day. Like Ben said, he explained, every position, every player. It's a little bit tough to decide. But Manchester United, the other side of Manchester, we've got the team here. Is Wout Weghorst, is he now confirmed? So could he possibly be on the bench? Or, with Marty out? No. Okay.
Weghorst is very close to signing, but he hasn't hit the deadline to be registered in time for the derby, so he isn't in contention. Obviously, question marks over Anthony Martial after he missed out midweek. That's a lower leg problem, very minor. He has trained today. So again, we'll wait and see if there's been any reaction to that. Eric Ten Hag said, if there's no reaction, he'll be in the squad. If not, it'll be Wednesday night. Elsewhere, Diego Dalot suffered a little bit of a setback with his hamstring problem. That's why we have Wan-Bissaka in there. And also, I've included Martinez starting alongside Varane, who was rested midweek. But of course, we still have the likes of Victor Lindelof or even Harry Maguire, who could come in if Eric Ten Hag doesn't quite fancy Martinez yet, who is still building fitness post-World Cup.
And the problem with Wan-Bissaka is obviously Dalot is breathing down his neck. But what is the timeline for him returning? Is there any kind of indication that he'll be back in the first team anytime soon?
Yeah, it doesn't look to be as serious as the initial setback that he picked up in the World Cup. So hopefully more of a precautionary measure. So maybe, like I say, you might get a couple of games out of Wan-Bissaka, but like I say, certainly nothing to suggest at this moment that that Delort setback is long term.
Now, positive week for the Toon. You guys got to the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. Must be, favourites now to lift that trophy. And even though I'm an Arsenal fan, obviously we're good friends, and so I'd love to see that. I'd love it. I would love it. But what is the injury situation there? We have had news today that Joel Linton was a bit of a naughty boy. Is there a possibility that he doesn't start? If so, who's coming in? And other injury news or inclusions in the team as well?
Yeah, injury news is pretty much as we were. We have 3 long-term absentees. Alexander Isak, we've seen return against Sheffield Wednesday and a cameo against Leicester. He's progressing really well, but he isn't really in line to start. The Joe Linton issue, there has been some suggestion that he might be, Eddie Howe basically said we're going to deal with this internally. What that quite means, I'm not sure. There's a line here. Joe Linton has been absolutely outstanding under Eddie Howe and what he's been doing up both on the training pitches and during his game time. But getting caught for drink driving, I don't know. They may want to make a bit of an example. If that's the case, and Joe Linton is pulled out of that starting lineup or even the squad, we have the likes of Alan Saint-Maxim, who's knocking on the door. I think Murphy, who could also come in there as well. So, we do have lots of options available.
Right, on to Nottingham Forest again. One of those teams, a bit like Bournemouth earlier. I don't think too many people are invested in them. What is the latest there?
Yeah, unfortunately, it looks as if Willy Bully suffered a setback again in the Carabao Cup, will miss out. If that's the case, then McKenna will come in. Fortunately, Morgan Gibbs-White was able to shake off a calf complaint midweek, and he's come through that one absolutely fine. I don't expect too many changes to that Forest lineup, so it's pretty much locked in. Possibly a first Premier League start for Scarpa.
Southampton really impressed in the Cup. Oh, sorry, just before we go on, Giandro wants to know about Nico Williams' injury.
So that was a facial injury. Understand it was took the blow to his nose in the FA Cup. Again, one that I shouldn't expect him to be too far away, but with regards to his start in that Forest backline, it looks as if Serge Aurier, for the moment anyway, is first choice.
On to, as I said, the Saints. Good week, but is it a good week in terms of injury news as well?
Stuart Armstrong is being managed, an ongoing groin issue. That's why he either is being omitted from the squad, or he's only had those sort of 10, 15, 20-minute cameos. Elsewhere, we could see Carlos Alcaraz.
I prefer your name.
Waiting for international clearance. Fingers crossed that goes through, which puts him in contention. The other main talking point is the knee injury for Bella Kotchap. That's probably going to keep him out of this one, but he shouldn't be sidelined for too long.
John Dre has said, nice to see Jason at centre-back for Forest. Yeah, I'm in there, folks. Left centre-back. So Tottenham, big questions on Kulusevski, but you don't have him in. Hill is there. Is Kulusevski injured? Is it question marks? I mean, are you treating him with kid gloves? Will the club do so as well?
He has been training with the squad. Obviously, he's just returned to full training, so it's a case of being able to manage the player. And I just see him more of an impact from the bench. Twofold here. First and foremost, because of that injury, and secondly, that Brian Gill has actually impressed in the absence of Richarlison and Kulusevski alongside Harry Kane and Heung-min Son. So I think he deserves a start in that North London derby, and maybe Kulusevski to get minutes from the bench sometime in the second half.
And the rest of the Tottenham team looking fit and ready?
Yeah, there's an outside chance for Richarlison. We're just waiting for news on that one. But generally, all of the big guns should be injury free. But whether they're going to be able to make the game or ready to start is another question. Ispa, that was an ankle problem that ruled him out just prior to kickoff in the FA Cup. Bentancur, we know that he's been managing that adductor issue since the World Cup. Had a little bit of a setback. Again, he shouldn't be far, but I don't think he's quite ready to start a game of this type of magnitude.
John Dre has asked the question with an obvious answer, really. Who's winning the North London derby, Ben?
It's Arsenal, isn't it, Jay?
Yes, got to be.
As long as Harry Kane scores a hat-trick, and then Arsenal can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
5-3 the Gunners.
I guess I'll take that. Tony Harrison has a question on top differentials to help in his league. I think we mentioned a little bit earlier, the one that I'm thinking could do well is Aston Villa, but I'd love to take a gamble on Danny Ings because he's so damn good, but he's just not a certain starter. So that's one differential there, Tony. Maybe one of the Villa attackers, definitely not Bailey, so it'd have to be Watkins. But yeah, also maybe if Matty Cash was fully fit as well, I'd possibly have him in too. West Ham, again, one team that is really struggling this season. Do they have any boosts though?
In typical David Moyes fashion, absolutely zero mention of any team news updates ahead of this weekend's game. What we do know from the FA Cup, there were a few absentees. Manuel Lanzini, a tight groin, he should be absolutely fine. The other talking point will be with regards to the availability of Gianluca Scamacca. That's a knee, probably was sent for a precautionary scan earlier this week. That makes us think that it's maybe a little bit more severe than they first thought. Hopefully not. So that's why I have Antonio starting. And Vladimir Sufal, he did not feature in the FA Cup, but it was more of an impact injury, a heavy knock on that one. That was a quick turnaround, I think, from the Leeds game, if I recall, a 2-2 draw. So he should be sort of there or thereabouts in terms of pushing for a squad. But I have erred on the side of caution, which is why I have Kira in on the right-hand side with Dawson and Agard paired centrally.
Right, so this is the last team and we got to shoot off very, very quickly. But Ben, Wolves, any updates from them?
Diego Costa, big question marks over the availability of the Spaniard. He missed out in the Carabao Cup, I think, and that was due to a problem that he picked up. Now, he has been taking part in elements of training, and that's the key here. He hasn't really took part in a full session. So he's one that I may look to change up. And if that's the case, Daniel Podence could maybe come in on that left-hand side. He-Chan maybe going a little bit higher up the pitch. I'm a little bit undecided. I'm going to ask a few questions and see what I can find out with regards to that. But elsewhere within that squad, Lopetegui said that he's waiting to make a few late calls, as he did against in the Carabao Cup. So again, not giving a lot away. We're having to read between the lines, but I think for the main part, this is how Wolves will hopefully line up, with just the big question mark over Diego Costa.
So final two questions, really, really quickly, Ben. Ferguson from Brighton is expected to start the next games.
I have him in my starting 11. Of course, Danny Welbeck is now fit and firing and available. So it's going to be a bit of a coin toss, but just given the performances of Brighton in recent games and results, I think that dictates how I've set my team up, which means that Ferguson does get that start.
And DeAndre with the last question, he was possibly the first question as well, Doherty, good punch, should he start most games?
We've talked about the Tottenham fullbacks all season. In fact, even before the season started, I brought Matt Doherty in on the back of his mid-season performances in those friendlies, during the break. I think we're now seeing a Matt Doherty who is back up to full speed in terms of his fitness. But when the games are coming thick and fast and there's quick turnarounds, of course, Antonio Conte does have other options in there, Emerson Royale being the main threat to his position. So, look, I'm hopeful. I keep my fingers crossed. That's why I brought my Doherty in. Is he nailed in for week on week? I couldn't say with any certainty. Like I say, you make that decision and you're aware of the issues and where those potential rotations are coming from. And like I say, Antonio Conte does have a few options in there.
Well, there you go, everybody. That is the end of the Premier Injuries stream. We're here every week, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss the latest injury news from in and around the Premier League. But for now, we're going to wish you the best of luck, the best of health. Have a fantastic game week. And if you do have any questions, check out the Premier Injuries website. You can tweet Ben or I, or you can leave messages below as well. And we will try our utmost. But obviously, it's an early deadline. This